Cosmic here, welcome back to the channel, and today we get to talk about a super exciting event that happened in Japan just this past weekend. And I do have to add a couple disclaimers at the start of this, but we have the first major, 57 players is a pretty good number if you ask me, tournament for Fusion World, and the results are a little bit spicy, I gotta say. So there has been a lot of talk about Gohan leading into the early, stages of the meta, but ultimately it was Ginu that ended up taking down the entire event. And as I know that Aspira is going to cover on his channel either later today or tomorrow whenever he gets that video out, he'll talk about the overall Japan meta and all the shop tournaments that have happened. However, this does bring to that point of that disclaimer I mentioned. So for those that don't know, yes, I've been covering Japanese or more niche trading card games for the last 10 years, and the one thing that is always consistent about trying to get lists out of Japan is that they don't exist unless it's from a major event or an official post from the company. They are very, very difficult to get. So yes, as the note for this video, I was only able to contact the winner of the event, and I did have a top 4 Ginu list as well that I found. We know that it was Ginu versus Vegeta in the finals, and we know that they talked about Vegeta doing well at a couple other events. However, I do not have that list, but I did find some other lists from around Twitter, from specifically the Japan players' point of view and what their tournaments are doing. So very clear. Going forward, other than just like whatever the digital client gives us, if I can do meta breakdowns like this, they will always be focused on the Japan meta side. There's a ton of other great content creators like Aspira, Universes X, and Eggman, who are, of course, going to cover the more global side of this in a lot of detail. But just because of the time that I've spent with Force of Will and the other games I've covered, I kind of follow a lot of Japanese players or shops already. So I figured it would just make sense for me to dig into this and try to cover the other part of, the global audience so that we can have this one shared meta view. And again, I think digital will dictate a lot of this, but I think it's still very important to have their voices get heard. So hopefully I can help do that as well. So let's just dive into it, right? We have 57 players who made it out to this event, which is pretty crazy considering it was the launch weekend. And the other disclaimer I have to add here is there has been just buyouts, an insane demand for this game in Japan that we actually posted boxes that are going for, 13,000 yen, which is insane. It's more than the Pokemon sets. It's more than One Piece right now in Japan, right? So the demand is absolutely there. Now, that does beg the question, right? Now, we know some of the green lists really do want to have a 2 of their secret rare. The Goku Red wants to have their secret rare as well, and those are just harder to get. So how much of availability did play a factor into these lists? It's hard to say, but I think at least with 57 players, we can definitely give some credit to those who went out to the event and played in the event, and those that ended up making top 8. Now, thanks to the shop that posted this, I will have a link to their breakdown tweets so you can see this as well. I've shared it out on Twitter already. I've shared it out on Facebook, so I've linked it all there already, so make sure to follow me on Twitter, or I guess X, if you want to see more breakdowns like this in the future. But we did get the top 8 as well. So we have the Gohan, Ginu, Cooler, Vegeta, and Goku, right? So 1 for each of those last 3 I mentioned. Then we have 2 for the Ginu, which again made both they won the event, right? And top 4. So I think with just how popular Gohan was, it was very clear that Ginu was going to do well in this event for how it wants to attack that matchup, which we'll talk a little bit more as we get to the decks themselves. But I think we are about to see a massive shift towards Broly, which in my opinion is the best leader for set 1. And a lot of people are just going to come around to that extra 5k base is really going to help push the Ginu deck into a more, not completely out of the meta, because it's still very good against other leaders, but it's going to knock Ginu down a notch. And then we see the rest of the support in the green set that we have healing if we need it. If the meta slows down, right, we can just go from the androids to the secret rare Gohan and have that as kind of like the oopsie got your board sort of thing, right? So what I love about green is it always has the adaptability that you're going to want, all contained in one color, which is insane when the game itself is color locked, for those who might not know. So again, this is just the overall quick breakdown, and then we can get into the list themselves. Now, again, as someone who is relatively new, like coming into this, yes, I did play Masters way back at launch, and I did, follow a little bit of the meta, like after, I think I dropped out of set 2, if I remember correctly, and then like set 3, I followed a little bit, and then that's when Final Fantasy really picked up, if I remember the timeline. It was 7 years ago, give me some slack here, but then we were like really big in Final Fantasy at that time, so I fell off on Dragon Ball, but the one thing that you're going to see repeated a lot in these lists is all of the self-awakener cards, right? And then again, I'm assuming people who are, from my channel don't have a lot of background in Dragon Ball. So I apologize if you're a veteran, just skip through this video because I'm going to be reiterating some like basic knowledge level stuff. So just skip ahead for the list. You're good, right? But for Dragon Ball, and a lot of it was like what I've seen for Battle Spirits, right? Like every single deck usually has like and Digimon too is probably a more relevant example for a lot of people. You have your early drop that says, oh, look at top 5 cards, do X, right? And we see a lot of that in every single archetype for Dragon Ball early on. We have what are called the Self-Awakeners that either come into play, you take a card from life, add it to your hand to gain an effect. Some of them, like the hit in red minus something by 5k, I think it is, which is really good. The yellow one, I think, is like rest something down and gain a life, and take one from your life, not gain a life. And those immediately don't feel like something that's entirely obvious, but once you start playing more and you just realize how quickly you want to get to the awakened side and the extra value that you get from going, drawing the card, going from 15 to 20k, getting the special effect that your leader wants to be doing on the awakened side, you really start to see how important these Self-Awakeners are. And then a lot of the lists are playing 6 to 8. So, we think about these lists overall. It's like, okay, we have our 4 1-drops, top searcher or just straight draw, right? We have our 6 to 8 Self-Awakeners, right? Because we want to make sure we can get to our awakened side. Then we have our 4 of super combo because it's just a 20k defensive card, and that's something that you're going to always want. You then have your, 3, I think this one's only running 2 of this, remember which one I remember it is. Like, you run 2 to 4 of your event that is going to give you a BP boost, right? So you make sure you can survive that attack. And actually, the Self-Awakener is right here. It's the tap one I remember from the Frieza starter deck. Good card. Make sure you pick up your starter deck for any color that you want to run. A lot of times you do at least have one blocker that does something, right? Now, this list in particular is more all-in focus. It doesn't have the Golden Frieza, which we're going to talk about in the next list. So this list really is about, what does Ginyu do? It's all the attacker. But, once you get past that, like, 24 to 28, like auto include cards. And it is set 1 to be fair. Like this is to be expected to some degree, but we're always going to see what's the best 1-drop, what are the best Self-Awakeners, and what is the best super combo to run in, right? So at an absolute minimum, that's what, 4, 8, 12, that's 16 cards. Round that up to 20 because you're always going to have a super rare that is usually tied to your leader, which we're going to see in the rest of the cards, right? So I guess a better estimate is like 20 to 24 auto build cards. And then from there, it's just, what does the rest of the set pool look like? And then also, set 2, it's kind of like, okay, here's our base 20. Did set 2 add anything? Yes or no, right? So something to keep in mind. But what's really important for the Ginyu list is that it's the aggro deck of the format. It is the red deck wins. And I'm going to include a photo right here too of just like the winning board state, just to show exactly how absurd that this can get in a lot of cases, that it is just going to set up a board and it's going to say, hey, I'm going to attack for 20k at a time. I'm going to attack like 8 or 9 times in a turn for 20k, and that is either going to win them the game, or your opponent is just going to be down to like 1 card in hand that they are most likely going to lose on the next turn. Now, yes, this does have the cost of it that you have to discard 2 of your own cards, but with the way the Ginyu works and because you're getting all the extra advantage through the cards that are replacing themselves and drawing extra cards, you're able to just discard the 2 cards you don't care about and just swing out for game, right? So this is very much the litmus test of what is the aggro deck of the format, how quickly can it win, how much do we respect it, and Ginyu is no surprise that it's going to be doing very, very well early on, so definitely something to keep in mind. And then, of course, this is something that can, of course, change as a little bit of time goes on, and see this maybe shift into more of a mid-range or slightly slower build, but at that point, you're getting a little bit into cooler, which we're going to talk about shortly. But with that in mind, I want to show off at least the other, what I believe is a top 4 Ginyu deck, and again, I'm including all that, the Twitter handles here as well, just so people can go look it up. And because a lot of the questions I was getting, like, oh, what's the one single hashtag that people are using? There isn't one. You can use the Dragon Ball Fusion World like all typed out, and that it gets some, but a lot of this is just like you have to find the TO that hosted the event. You have to figure out what they called the event. Then you have to go into Twitter to find, enter into the search to type what the event was. Then you have to go, okay, I want to find the Broly. So then you have to use the TO's guidance and then do like hashtag Broly. But then you realize like all the Broly players are using hashtag Broly, but then Broly is also just Broly. So people talk about Broly, right? Like it is very difficult sometimes to find these lists. So again, I just wanted to try to do my part because I do follow a lot of these stores already. Like Card Kingdom just posted a bunch of lists as well. But we'll see what future events look like, and not to digress too much, but the other one I want to mention here, right, is we do have the Golden Frieza, which is extremely strong if you've played in the starter deck format, just getting to lock down your opponent's battle card and then keep swinging for 35k at the leader. It's an annoying card when you get it in doubles, and can be really good at locking down things like some of the green's top end. So, or like the opponent's Frieza if they have the 40k cooler, like we're going to be talking about. But again, otherwise we have like the blocker card, and you can see this one does have a few more of the events that are just going to either search for the combo pieces or give you a BP boost. And then the one drop Frieza I really like that just taps down something. So going second, it's been extremely strong to play that card. Like I think this card is, I'm not going to say underrated, because I think people do acknowledge how good it is, but I haven't seen it in as many yellow lists as I thought I would. And again, this one I understand at least a little bit more, because you're either going to build like all in, do the combo, try to win as fast as possible, and then others are going to be build like slightly slower, but you realize that you're still winning through Ginu's leader effect, because that's obviously how you want to build the deck. So doesn't get as much value, you know, and going to the higher end of yellow, you really want to be focused on those like 2 and less drops overall for the deck. But other than that, not much else to say. A lot of similarities between these lists, but again, what to be expected and all, given it is just a set 1 format. Moving on from there, we have what I assumed was the top 8 cooler list. And again, you can go check their tweet just to keep me honest on it, or over on that side. Because based on the amount of rounds that they recorded and the time that they posted it, it could have been a very similar event, or it could be the exact event that they were at, but I believe this is the top 8 cooler list from that event. Now, the big thing to note here is, of course, the Golden Frieza, as we mentioned. It's just so good at locking down your opponent's stuff, but the one big card that stands out in like, hey, if we're playing cooler, why are we playing, you know, what goes with cooler, is the 4-drop Frieza that does not restand itself, but is a 40k attacker. So that's where we have Cooler's effect to untap something comes into play. The discard effect is kind of costly, but if you think about if your opponent has something special that they want to protect, that 40Ks could be really difficult, and then they're going to be losing cards from their hand as well. Just on top of the fact that a 40k attacker on 4 is pretty silly, right? And so when you combine this to the 4 cost, assuming that you're awakened, you discard the card from your hand. You also get to recover 1 energy that you played on 4, and this deck did not have any of the event cards. But then you get to like play Frieza, use Cooler's effect, play the 1-drop Frieza, tap something down, so then you're killing something and hitting their leader in case they got like a very aggressive, self-awakener start. And that's pretty good, right? That's where we do see the full, for a 12 1-drops here that really want to combo in with Cooler's effect. Now, I will say, and just in terms of like the overall yellow decks that we see, I think this is one that we're going to be seeing pop up a bit more, because 40k is just really good at making sure you're still being aggressive into those Brolys that are most likely going to pop up as kind of a retaliation to all the Ginyu decks, and then also just some of the other, red and blue cards that they want to be playing in those early turns. 40k just says, nope, I'm going to check this. You can't remove it, you can't shrink it too easy because you still have like 30k. Blue does have some good answers where they can just bounce it out of the way, either to bomb the deck or back to hand, which can be a really big reset. But at least for the other yellow and green, it can be really difficult for them to remove. So I do really like this as a card. And again, other than that, Self-Awakener, blocker, right? The SR Cooler, which can also KO something, right? So a lot of, again, similar cards that we're going to be seeing in these packages. The one drop draw, some of them we're seeing a lot of those colors as well. And again, the tap effect. So the other interesting one is seeing that the 3-drop Frieza getting used from the starter deck, because it is a 25k and can challenge Broly as well. And sorry, I'm going to be saying Broly a lot in this video, as you can tell, but I think that is something that we have to consider given how the format is likely to shift. So a lot of those 25k vanillas I would expect, or 25k breakpoint, I would expect to see more of an importance going forward and how the meta is going to develop. Moving on from there, I did my absolute best to try to find a red deck, and I tweeted about this quite a bit, but red just really did not have a great showing, at least early on from what I could find in the list, Goku or Beerus, but you'll notice that one did top 8 this event, so I tried to find something. Shout out to this person, Sai. They were not at the event from what I could tell, but based on their tweet, they actually took it to 2 different events, or sorry, 3 total. They won 2 of those events, and then their teammate placed second in another with this exact list. So I think there's definitely some merit if you want to start with a red Goku list here. Definitely one to look at too. Just getting a 5k boost to your team is very good, because it's effectively asking a extra card out of your opponent's hand every single turn, which can just be very taxing time and time again. And then, of course, we know about like the 10k or 20k shrinks that the deck is very well equipped with. We also, again, have the Self-Awakener hit, which can take something that also minus 5k it. It is only the battle card, so that's where we see the 20 versus 25k pop up again. But I think having the 3-drop Goku is going to be just extremely good, right? It's the removal, it's the 25k that you want to be hitting. It's just an all-around really great card to be playing in this meta. And then of course, I know there's a lot of back and forth discussions about the secret rare, right? Being able to shrink something, and then if it KOs a battle card, you actually deal a little bit of damage. And I love this card. You don't ever need, like, it's never going to be a 4-0, but it is something you absolutely need, in my opinion, for the deck, because it allows you to set up turns into like the mid to late game where you're able to get that surprise damage that they might not be expecting. And when you're able to stack all these neg effects from the cards that you're playing on top of the extra 5k that you get from your leader, it is going to be near impossible for them to protect that last card. So it allows you to set up your opponent to a board state where it says, hey, you're going to lose your best card on your side of the field. You're also going to take a point of damage, and then it's still a very real threat on its own on the following turn. So it's one of those things that you only ever want to see one time should be good enough. So 2 is probably the right number. I would want to see how this lines up a bit better into how the format's going to go from here. So I might start with 3 personally, but I definitely think that 2 to 3 is the right number. And then of course, just the double strike and removal from the starter deck. This is kind of like the vibe of red, right? Lots of BP reduction based effects. It gets around their on KO abilities because in this game, BP reduction does not count towards KO, unlike some of the other Bandai games. So definitely keep that in mind. But that is very important for a lot of the yellow and green matchups. So I think that's where, depending on the type of meta that you're experiencing, I think the Goku deck is going to be a lot better than what we've seen in week 1 so far, but it's going to require a little bit more time for people to find those more refined lists and figure out what are the different BP breakpoints that they care about as the meta develops, so you know which BP hitting effects that you want to be playing, right? Because there's a lot of 5, 10, or 20s that are in the set that you want to be flexible with. But if it comes down, if it's a 5 drop, but then it's too late, you want to try to care about more about the early game. Or if it's a mid to late game format, then okay, what are the biggest BP reductions that I can get? Because I know that we're going to have to counter against like the big Broly or something, right? So definitely something to keep in mind. Like, I think this is another one that really requires the meta to be a bit more established before it's really going to shine. So I think Goku is going to, or Red in general, I think is going to struggle for probably another week or so, but then really start to come back as people find out what those exact numbers are looking like and can respond to the meta accordingly. Now, similar token here is with Vegeta. Again, Vegeta was in the finals with a Ginu deck for the 57-player event. However, they didn't post about their list. So I am left with what I could find for this list. You can see this is actually on February 16th, so a little bit before the event. And the one thing I'm just going to add here, it's like, yes, it's a lot of the starter deck. We do have the super rare from the set with the Trunks that is going to, remove something, which is just a very strong self-awakener and removal effectively. Just insanely good. Pick up 4 copies. Like, I don't know why that was a super rare when a lot of the other effects are just rares, but hey, at least it's going to look pretty because of the foiling. And then, of course, we have the super rares from the starter deck as well. The Sinister Sickle I really like just because more targeted removal. And again, I'm using removal a bit more loosely in this sense because of the game being just more tempo focused in general, a bounce is as good as a removal a lot of times. Not obviously all the time, but generally if you can bounce something back, you're pretty happy with it. The one thing that does stick out, of course, is the 15K and one. This is like one that gets cycled every time. This is probably just something they couldn't replace right away. It is a 10K guard, which is really nice, but I expect this to get replaced early on. And then, of course, our early drops across the top is about what we'd expect. I know what a lot of the other lists have been popping up kind of around Twitter and whatnot, but I think, these are pretty staple. These are pretty stable. And of course, like this sticks out a little bit, and then you could probably shift into a couple more event cards, depending on how the meta is going to line up and what you would expect. And I know somebody's going to say in the comments, so I got to say it as well, no Pilaf? Yeah, I know, but like, again, people are trying to figure out these blue lists, so they did good. There was this list and a very identical list, so I just put it. I think this is like the card stores list that I put out. So whenever you see like card asterisks or card in the name, if I remember, this was an LGS, so I just wanted to give the LGS a shout out for that. But definitely keep that in mind. But I've seen a lot of Vegeta lists that are similar. And then of course we got to talk about what was the Gohan deck because it was just so popular, and this is something that we've seen quite a bit time and time again in terms of just like it's popular. It's green doing green stuff. We have the energy recycler to make sure you never, lose out that way. We have the extra ramp from hand, which is just better than the Goku promo that we got. So shout out to, I think that's a super rare as well, just being better. It is what it is. But getting that early removal is extremely important for surviving. Android early removal is very good. And then Broly just being your classic finisher to saying, hey, This is a 45k who's going to kill something, draw a card, and just be a double attacker for a billion damage, right? And then, of course, we have other ways that we can boost up the BP if we need to in a battle, but it is going to be a double attacker. Now, the thing, of course, to add there is that a lot of the other finishes that we've seen are double strike, right? So they deal 2 damage at once instead of Broly, which only deals 1. And there is a merit to you want to deal 2 instead of 1 because then it's 1 less card that they have in their hand to work with. But at 45k, I think at this point, Broly's just going to end the game himself anyways, on top of removing one of their best threats. So the Broly coming down is just going to demand such a presence from your opponent. It's going to be very difficult for them to realistically do anything to crawl back from. But again, I would expect in the very near future, a lot of these will shift into Broly. But again, a lot of this does remain pretty similar in terms of like what is the green shell overall doing. And, you know, Broly at the top end plus ramp plus removal. That's kind of where you're at with green. Like, so if you like playing, as I mentioned in the starter deck video, if you just love playing big dummy idiots and ramping a bunch of cards where you can, then green's for you. It's pretty straightforward otherwise. And then a bonus, because a lot of people have been asking about it, is androids. Yes, there was an android list that went, I think this was a 4-0 list if I remember correctly. But again, we see the Vegeta for the ramp and KO. We see the androids for the KO. We see the Broly at the top end. So again, what I really want to stress is a lot of it is the same. This one did actually include the secrets as well, because it is that board wipe, which can be really strong. And then just a 50k attacker is a 50k attacker. So a lot of respect onto the Ginu matchup, right? Because if you're not Broly, if the Ginu deck sets up and you don't immediately answer it, you're dead. That's just how it is. That is we are the if you got it, you got it, right? Style of play for the Ginu deck. So the green decks are likely going to either, again, swap to Broly, or you just have the Gohan security. I keep saying secret to punish them for overextending on their board. But again, then it's like you can only run a 2 of, so it's a best of 1 game, so it's not super consistent that you're going to see it because there's not a searcher yet. But whenever we get a Gohan searcher, then sure, great value, love to see it. But until then, it is going to be like, what is the value of best of 1 versus just play Broly and have a 25k that they struggle to deal with, right? So that is just a really quick overview of the. Let's get to the last one here. Let's a quick overview of the top 8 from the event. Like I said, I couldn't find the exact top 8, so I want to at least include some similar builds that we've been seeing around Twitter. Again, huge shout out to Catsid and TCG74 who shared their list on Twitter and also was very kind to respond in DM. So again, thank you for that. So I could just share out those results. And obligatory disclaimer here at the end, I'm going to continue to cover the Japan, very focused on the Japan meta where possible, because I know Aspira, Universes X, and Eggman are going to be really focused on the global side, and there are a lot of great content creators. Go check them out. But for me, I'm just, dipping my toe into Fusion World and helping out locally. So for me, it's just going to be a lot of, digital gameplay videos when it comes out. Hopefully a locals picks up, and then I'll cover the Japan events when they come out. So definitely look forward to that, and subscribe if you want to see more Fusion World content in the future, and a box opening or case opening, depending on how many I can actually get. Hopefully up tomorrow at the time of recording this and when it goes live. Hopefully up Thursday, and then to celebrate Friday's launch, because I'm playing a celebration event. And spoiler, I'm playing Broly for the celebration event. 25k is just good. It's Whitebeard. It's Whitebeard and healing in the same deck. I don't know. It's just insane to me. So will Broly be dethroned in set 1? We will see. But until then, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.